Why did you leave me? The CEO's daughter asked the single dad. No one expected that. Rain tapped softly against the windows of the downtown cafe as Daniel Harper wiped the last table near the entrance. The evening crowd had finally thinned, leaving behind half-empty coffee cups, fading conversations, and the scent of cinnamon and espresso lingering in the air. Daniel glanced at the clock. 9:43 p.m. Almost closing time. His shoulders ached from 14 straight hours of work, but he didn't complain. Complaining never paid bills. Across the cafe, his 8-year-old daughter Lily sat curled in a booth with her coloring book, quietly drawing little yellow stars around a stick figure family. Daniel smiled faintly. She looked up. Daddy, are we going home soon? 10 more minutes, sweetheart. Okay. She returned to coloring while Daniel stacked chairs. The cafe owner had offered to let Lily stay during evening shifts after school because Daniel couldn't afford a babysitter anymore. 3 jobs, no savings, a tiny apartment, and a mountain of debt left behind by his late wife's medical treatments. Still, every morning he woke up and kept going for Lily. That was enough, or at least he tried to believe it was. The bell above the cafe door suddenly chimed. Daniel looked up automatically. A black luxury car had stopped outside. A woman stepped in first, wearing a gray business coat and holding an umbrella. Behind her came a teenage girl, maybe 16 or 17, dressed in an expensive school uniform. The girl froze the second she saw Daniel. Her face went pale. The umbrella slipped from her hand. Dad, the word hit the room like shattered glass. Daniel stopped breathing. The teenage girl stared at him with trembling lips and watery eyes. Dad, Lily looked up from the booth, confused. Daniel's hands slowly lowered to his sides. No, impossible. The girl took another shaky step forward. It's really you. Daniel whispered the name before he could stop himself. Emma. The woman beside the girl inhaled sharply, clearly nervous. Emma's eyes filled instantly with tears. For a long moment nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Emma asked the question that froze Daniel's heart. Why did you leave me? 10 years earlier, Daniel had once lived a completely different life. Before debt, before exhaustion, before coffee stains and overdue rent notices. At 28, he was an ambitious architect working for one of the largest construction companies in the city. He had talent, charm, and dreams big enough to stretch beyond the skyline. That was where he met Victoria Sinclair, the daughter of billionaire CEO Richard Sinclair. Victoria was elegant, intelligent, and far too confident for Daniel's comfort. She challenged him constantly, argued with him during meetings, and somehow made him fall in love without realizing it. Against all expectations, they married. Richard Sinclair hated it. To him, Daniel was just a middle-class nobody trying to climb into wealth through his daughter. You'll never belong in this family, Richard once told him coldly. Daniel ignored him, because Victoria loved him, and when their daughter Emma was born, nothing else mattered. At least for a while. Then came the accident. Daniel still remembered the phone call. Victoria's car, rainy highway, truck driver asleep at the wheel. She died before the ambulance arrived. Everything collapsed after that. Daniel drowned in grief. Weeks blurred together. He barely slept, barely ate. Emma cried constantly for her mother. And Richard Sinclair stepped in. At first it seemed helpful. Then controlling. You're unstable, Richard told him. Emma needs structure, security. Daniel fought back. But Richard had money, lawyers, influence. Daniel had depression, missed work, and emotional breakdowns nobody understood. The custody battle became brutal. Then came the lie that destroyed everything. Daniel was told Emma would stay temporarily with her grandfather while legal matters were settled. But one day when he arrived to pick her up, the mansion gates remained closed. Richard's assistant handed Daniel documents. Full custody granted, restraining order pending, and the cruelest part, Emma had supposedly been told her father abandoned her willingly. Daniel spent months fighting it. Then years. But Sinclair money buried every attempt. Eventually he disappeared from their world entirely. Not because he stopped loving Emma. Because he ran out of ways to reach her. Back in the cafe, Emma stared at him like someone seeing a ghost. You're alive, she whispered. Daniel swallowed hard. Of course I'm alive. Her voice cracked. They told me you left us. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. The old pain returned instantly. The woman beside Emma spoke carefully. Emma found some old documents recently. She started asking questions. Emma stepped closer. Grandfather said you didn't want me anymore. Lily looked nervously between them. Daddy, who is she? Daniel's heart twisted. Emma's gaze finally shifted toward Lily. For a second confusion crossed her face. Then realization. You have another daughter. Daniel nodded quietly. This is Lily. Emma looked suddenly wounded by that fact, though she tried hiding it. Lily climbed down from the booth and stood beside Daniel. The cafe felt unbearably silent. Finally Emma asked softly, "Did you really try to find me?" Daniel laughed once, but there was no humor in it. For years, Emma's breathing became shaky. The woman beside her gently touched her shoulder. "We should go," she whispered. But Emma didn't move. No, her eyes locked onto Daniel again. "I need the truth." The cafe owner quietly turned the sign to closed and disappeared into the kitchen, understanding something deeply personal was unfolding. Daniel slowly sat at one of the tables. Emma sat across from him. Lily remained beside her father protectively. For several seconds Daniel couldn't even find words. How do you explain 10 years of heartbreak to your own child? Finally he spoke. "When your mom died, I fell apart." Emma's eyes softened immediately. "I couldn't think straight. I barely survived losing her." He paused. "Your grandfather used that." Emma looked down. Daniel continued carefully. "He thought I wasn't good enough for this family long before your mother died." The woman near the door looked uncomfortable but didn't interrupt. "I fought for you," Daniel said quietly. "I lost everything trying." Emma's lips trembled. "Why didn't you come see me at school? Birthdays, anything." "I tried." He reached into his old wallet slowly. From the back pocket, hidden beneath worn receipts, he pulled a faded photograph. A tiny 8-year-old Emma smiling beside a birthday cake. Another photo. Emma at ballet practice. Another. Emma leaving school holding a violin case. Emma stared at them in shock. "I watched from far away whenever I could," Daniel whispered. "Just to know you were okay." Tears rolled down Emma's face. "You were there, every year." Emma suddenly covered her mouth and cried silently. The pain of lost years crashed over both of them at once. Lily gently tugged Daniel's sleeve. "Daddy, why was her grandpa mean?" Daniel hesitated, but Emma answered instead, "Because rich people sometimes think money gives them the right to control everyone." The bitterness in her voice surprised him. She wiped her tears quickly. "I confronted him yesterday." Daniel looked up sharply. "What happened?" Emma gave a sad laugh. "He admitted everything." The room went still. "He said he thought he was protecting me from a weak man who couldn't provide stability." Daniel lowered his gaze. Emma leaned forward, but he was wrong. Outside, rain continued falling over the city lights. Inside the small cafe, years of silence slowly unraveled. Emma learned about Daniel's struggles after losing custody. How he spiraled into debt. How he left architecture. How he met Lily's mother years later. How Lily's mother died from cancer when Lily was only 3. Emma listened quietly to every painful detail. "You raised her alone?" Emma asked softly. Daniel nodded. "She's my world." Lily smiled sleepily against his shoulder. Emma stared at the little girl for a long moment. Then she whispered something unexpected. "She looks safe with you." Daniel's eyes watered instantly. Nobody had told him that in years. Not after missed bills. Not after working endless shifts. Not after sacrificing sleep, dreams, and dignity just to survive. Safe. That single word nearly broke him. Emma looked around the tiny cafe. "You really work here every night? And mornings at a warehouse?" Her expression tightened painfully. "You used to design skyscrapers. Life changes." Emma suddenly looked angry again, not at him. At everything stolen from them. "You should have fought harder." Daniel blinked, then nodded slowly. "You're right." Emma inhaled sharply, surprised he agreed. "I should have." Silence settled again. Then Daniel added quietly, "But after a while, I thought maybe you hated me." Emma instantly shook her head. "No." Her voice cracked hard. "I waited for you." Daniel looked like someone had punched the air from his lungs. "When I was little," she whispered, "I used to sit near the gate after school because I thought maybe one day you'd come back." Daniel covered his eyes briefly. Years. So many wasted years. Not because love disappeared, because lies stood between them. Near midnight, headlights appeared outside again. Another black luxury car. Emma's face hardened instantly. Daniel already knew who it was before the door opened. Richard Sinclair stepped into the cafe. Even at 70, he carried power like a weapon. Expensive coat, sharp posture, cold eyes. But tonight there was something unfamiliar beneath his confidence. Regret. His gaze landed on Daniel first. Then Lily. Then Emma. "Emma," he said quietly. "You left without security." "I'm fine." Richard looked at Daniel for a long moment. "You look older." Daniel almost laughed. "So do you." Tension filled the room. Lily clung closer to Daniel. Emma stood up suddenly. "No more lies tonight." Richard exhaled slowly. Then, to everyone's shock, he removed his gloves and sat down. Not like a billionaire CEO. Like an old man carrying guilt. I thought I was protecting her, he admitted. Daniel stared silently. Richard continued. You were grieving, unstable, angry at the world. My wife died. I know. No, Daniel said sharply. You know she died. You don't know what it felt like. Richard looked down. For the first time in his life, the powerful CEO had no immediate response. Emma crossed her arms. You stole my father from me. Richard's jaw tightened painfully. Yes. The honesty stunned everyone, even Daniel. Richard looked at him quietly. I told myself you would ruin her future. He paused. But the truth is, Victoria loved you more than she ever listened to me. Daniel said nothing, and after she died, Richard whispered, losing Emma too terrified me. The cafe became completely silent. Not justification, not excuse, just truth. Ugly, human truth. Richard slowly turned toward Lily. You're protecting this little one the same way, aren't you? Daniel looked down at his daughter. Yes. Richard nodded faintly. Then something nobody expected happened. The billionaire CEO lowered his head. I was wrong. Emma's eyes widened. Daniel froze. Richard Sinclair, who had dominated boardrooms, politicians, entire corporations, sat in a tiny cafe and apologized. Not perfectly, not emotionally, but genuinely. You loved your daughter, Richard said quietly to Daniel. And I took her away. Daniel's anger should have exploded. Instead exhaustion filled him. Years of pain suddenly felt heavier than rage itself. Emma stepped toward her father slowly. You missed everything, she whispered. Daniel's eyes filled. I know. My birthdays. I know. My piano recitals. I know. My first heartbreak. Daniel looked shattered. Emma stared at him for several seconds. Then finally, she hugged him. Hard, like a child reclaiming something stolen. Daniel broke instantly. His arms wrapped around her as years of grief collapsed between them. Lily smiled sleepily beside them. Even Richard looked away quietly. 3 months later, life looked different. Not magically perfect, but healing. Emma began visiting Daniel and Lily every weekend. At first awkwardly, then naturally. She taught Lily piano. Daniel helped Emma with architecture school applications. And for the first time in years, laughter returned to his life. One evening Emma stood beside him outside Lily's school. You know, she said casually, grandfather offered you a position at Sinclair Development again. Daniel smirked. I heard. You didn't answer. I'm thinking. Emma smiled slightly. You should take it. Why? Because you were good at building things. Daniel glanced at her. And, Emma's eyes softened. You still are. He looked toward Lily running across the playground. Then back at Emma. Maybe some broken things could never fully heal. Maybe 10 stolen years could never truly be replaced. But sometimes life still leaves a door open. Not for perfection, for second chances. Emma slipped her hand into his arm. Dad, Daniel smiled. Yeah, she leaned gently against him. I'm glad you never stopped loving me. His voice nearly failed him. Never.